This week we're looking at the discipline of fasting as we continue to pursue how to live on purpose and make essential disciplines of the Christian life a regular part of our life. And as we looked at the discipline of fasting, this week I shared with you that the discipline of fasting helps us find God's greatest good when we need it the most. Notice the language there that I used in leading you this week. It was not that God helps us find our greatest good. It's that He helps us find His greatest good. And that fasting depends on three very important things: dependence on God, circumstance, and transcendence. So we find ourselves in a particular time and place, that circumstance, where we need a deeper dependence on God, a reliance on Him more so than we already have. Because what we want is transcendence. We want to see God's divine will revealed for us. And this past week, the Ninevites in Jonah chapter 3 helped us to understand that. But I also talked about some other passages that help us to understand this. And so I want to walk through those passages very quickly to talk with you about how we see dependence, circumstance, and transcendence all working together to see God's greatest good for us. First is in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 15 and following. It says this: "And the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he became sick. David therefore sought God on behalf of the child. And David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. And the elders of his house stood beside him to raise him up from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat with them. On the seventh day the child died. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, Behold, while the child was yet alive, we spoke to him, and he did not listen to us. How then can we say to him that the child is dead? He may do himself some harm." But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, David understood that the child was dead. And David said to his servants, Is the child dead? They said, He is dead. Then David arose from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his clothes. And he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. He then went to his own house. And when he asked, they set food before him, and he ate. Then his servants said to him, What is this thing that you have done? You have fasted and wept for the child while he was alive, but when the child was dead, you arose and ate food. And David said, While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, Who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me." Here we see David in a dire circumstance, a child who is dying. And what he needs is a deeper dependence on who God is and what God is going to do. In this particular case, what David fasted for was to see God's revealed will for the child. And God's revealed will was that the child would die. As David sees God's revealed will, he ends his fast and says, I now know what God expected and what he wanted to see happen in this circumstance and what he was doing. In this unfortunate circumstance, we do see a fast not yielding our expected result or desired result. In the next case, we see Nehemiah chapter 1, as Nehemiah is brought to the place in which he finds out what is happening to the state of Jerusalem, in that when he receives the message, he receives this. They say to him, The remnant that is in the province, who survived the exile, is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed with fire. This is the circumstance. And it's at this point that when he hears these words, it says this in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4, As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So, here he is with this particular circumstance. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down and the gates are set on fire. Jerusalem is in shambles. And his response in this circumstance is to seek a deeper dependence on God. So he fasts. In that dependence, he goes through a prayer that finally leads him ultimately to the throne room of the king, in which case he is moved to action to go and to restore Jerusalem. And he does. The last instance in which I will lead you is in Matthew chapter 4. After Jesus' baptism, Jesus goes, he is led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. This is the circumstance. Jesus is led by the Spirit of God to be tempted by the devil. And what he needs in his humanity is a deeper dependence on his Father. And so the scriptures say, and after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. So in the midst of that circumstance, as he is faced with the temptation that Satan will wield against him, his response is to fast. And in that, the transcendent God of God, the transcendence and the divine will is revealed in Jesus, because in his sinless humanity, he is able to overcome the schemes of the devil in that instance, even when he is hungry. Because dependence, circumstance, and transcendence all work together. So I hope this week, as you start to exercise the muscles of the discipline of fasting, that you can see these three passages and also the passage of the Ninevites that we read, and to say, there are going to be circumstances in my life, and there may be those circumstances right now. Hopefully you've identified areas in which you can exercise this discipline. I need a deeper dependence on God here. And as I depend on him more in this circumstance, what I'm truly seeking is not what I want. I want to seek God's greatest good, no matter the circumstance. I want his divine will to be revealed to me. And as you exercise that discipline of fasting, more and more, it's going to put you in a place where you can take the discipline of the word, the discipline of prayer, the discipline of fasting, working together to live on purpose.